Have you noticed that today, those who appear too much becomes a target? While everyone runs to show off, there is another game going on underneath. People who disappear, talk less, reveal almost nothing, and still control the pace, access, and narrative. In this video, I'm going to show you why silence and invisibility have become the most modern form of power, and how the transparency society has turned exposure into obligation, and vulnerability into currency. We live in a time where everyone wants to be seen, heard, validated, where every thought becomes a story, every feeling becomes a post, every moment becomes content. But while the masses expose themselves to exhaustion, a minority understood the real game. Whoever controls access to himself controls power. The question that remains is, are you still chasing attention, or have you discovered that the real power lies in being scarce, selective, and, when necessary, completely invisible? A. Fatal exposure. The society of transparency has created a death trap. It has turned exposure into a social obligation. You haven't realized it yet, but every photo, every opinion, every intimate moment you share is being used against you. Not by hackers or criminals, but by the very system that has convinced you that being authentic means emotionally undressing in public. Think about it. When was the last time you kept something to yourself? When was the last time you lived a moment without documenting, without sharing, without transforming it into content? Performance culture has taught you that to exist without witnesses is to exist halfway. Lie. Constant exposure doesn't make you more human, it makes you more vulnerable. Every detail you reveal is a weapon that can be used against you later. Each feeling you externalize becomes ammunition for those who want to manipulate you, control you, or simply discard you when it no longer fits. Oversharing has become an epidemic. People telling trauma on social media, people exposing relationship fights, people turning pain into entertainment. And the worst, believing that this is healing, that this is genuine connection. It is not. It is self-exploration disguised as authenticity. Have you noticed how the most exposed people are also the most attacked? How can those who show themselves the most are the ones who suffer the most cancellation, judgment, invasion? It's no coincidence. It is a direct consequence of a choice to give up control over your own narrative. The attention economy has turned your private life into a product. Every like, every comment, every view feeds a system that profits from your vulnerability. You're not connecting, you're selling yourself for validation crumbs. And there's more. The fatal exposure doesn't just happen online. It happens when you tell your plans before you execute, when you reveal your weaknesses to anyone, when you turn every conversation into a confessional. You're giving too much information to people who don't deserve access to your life. The result? Constant validation anxiety, chronic FOMO, social burnout. You live chasing approval from people you don't even know well, while your vital energy runs down the drain of hyperconnectivity. Algorithmic manipulation keeps you hooked on this cycle. The platforms know exactly how to make you share more, expose yourself more, give yourself more. They studied your brain better than you did, and they use this knowledge to keep you stuck on the wheel of infinite exposure. But here's the truth that no one tells you. Those who expose themselves too much lose the mystery, and without mystery, there is no power. Without control over access to yourself, you become a cheap commodity in the attention market. The fatal exposure is not only about social networks, it's about a mindset that taught you that total transparency is a virtue, that hiding something is dishonesty, that privacy is something for those who have something to hide. These are all lies that keep you vulnerable and controllable. The first step to regaining your power is to understand that you don't owe anyone anything. Neither explanation, nor justification, nor full access to his life. Your privacy is not paranoia, it is protection. 2. Strategic silence. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is high-impact communication. While everyone talks too much, explains too much, justifies too much, you learn to use silence as a weapon of surgical precision. And that changes everything. Think of someone you respect deeply. I bet this person doesn't explain himself all the time, doesn't go around telling his life to anyone, doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. She speaks when necessary, with weight, with purpose. The rest is strategic silence. Silence as power works because it forces the other to fill the void. When you don't respond immediately, when you don't justify yourself, when you don't feed the drama, you force the other person to deal with their own insecurities. And it reveals a lot about who she really is. Have you ever noticed how anxious people get desperate when they meet someone who doesn't give up easily? How do they start to talk more, to expose themselves more, to try to break the silence in any way? This is no coincidence. It is the power of silence in action. High-impact communication works like this. Fewer words, more weight. When you speak little, your every word gains importance. When you're not always available for conversation, your presence becomes valuable. When you don't explain every move, your actions gain mystery. Strategic silence also protects you from committing unnecessarily. How many times have you said something in the heat of the moment and regretted it later? How many times have you given too much information to the wrong person? Silence gives you time to process, to choose your words, to decide if it's worth responding. But beware. Strategic silence is not muteness. It's not being rude or antisocial. It is to be selective. It is choosing when to speak and when to be silent. It is to understand that not every provocation deserves an answer. Not every question deserves an explanation. Not every drama deserves its energy. Quiet authority is real. People who talk less and influence more exist in all environments. They don't need to shout to be heard. They don't need to impose themselves to have respect. They cultivated the art of being present without being available, of being important without being accessible. Silence is also a form of emotional control. When you don't react immediately, when you don't get carried away by provocation, when you stay calm even under pressure, you demonstrate a level of self-control that few possess. And this generates automatic respect. There's more. Strategic silence protects you from manipulation. Manipulative people depend on their reaction to function. They throw emotional bait waiting for you to bite. When you don't bite, when you remain silent, you break the cycle of manipulation. In the age of dopamine and social media, where everyone needs immediate response, constant validation, instant feedback, those who master silence have a brutal competitive advantage. You're no longer in the game of reactivity, you are in the game of strategy. Strategic silence also filters people. Those who can't deal with your moments of silence, those who get anxious when you don't respond on time, those who interpret your reservation as rejection, probably don't have the emotional maturity to be in your life. Remember, talking less and influencing more is not about being cold or distant. It's about being intentional. It's about choosing your battles, your words, your moments. It's about understanding that silence, used correctly, is one of the most sophisticated forms of communication out there. 3. Intentional invisibility. Intentional invisibility is the art of disappearing at the right moment. It's not about hiding from the world. It's about controlling when and how you show up. It's about understanding that constant presence diminishes your value, while strategic absence multiplies it. Have you noticed how some people can be remarkable even though they appear little? How do they create more impact in a sporadic appearance than others in constant exposure? This is not luck. It is intentional invisibility applied masterfully. The culture of hyperconnectivity has taught you that always being available is a virtue, that responding immediately is education, that being online is being alive. Lie. To always be visible is to always be vulnerable. It's giving too much access to those who don't deserve it. It's wearing yourself out in interactions that don't add value. Intentional invisibility works because it creates scarcity. And scarcity generates value. When you're not always around, when you don't answer every message on time, when you don't show up at every event, your presence becomes special. People begin to value the moments they have access to you. But beware, intentional invisibility is not ghosting. It is not to disappear without warning or explanation. It is to be strategic about your availability. It is consciously choosing when to be present and when to be absent. It is communicating through absence, not through abandonment. Social media detox is a powerful form of intentional invisibility. When you leave the platforms for strategic periods, you break the external validation cycle. You stop feeding the algorithm your attention and energy. You regain control over your time and your mind. Intentional invisibility also protects your emotional energy. Every social interaction has an energy cost. Every conversation, every meeting, every answer you give drains some of your internal battery. When you're selective about your appearances, you preserve energy for what really matters. There are people who confuse intentional invisibility with antisociality. It's not. It's about quality versus quantity. It is to prefer a deep and meaningful conversation to 10 superficial interactions. It's choosing to be truly present when you decide to show up, rather than being half present all the time. Intentional invisibility is also a form of resistance to forced transparency. In a society that requires you to always be available, always visible, always explaining where you are and what you are doing, choosing invisibility is an act of rebellion. It is refusing to be constantly monitored. The digital panopticon has turned all of us into willing prisoners. You carry a device that tracks every movement, every location, every interaction. Intentional invisibility is turning off this tracking when you choose. It is to recover the right to exist without witnesses. When you practice intentional invisibility, you force people to deal with your absence. And that reveals a lot about them. Who gets anxious when you disappear? Who interprets his absence as personal rejection? Who can't function without your constant presence? This is valuable information about the quality of your relationships. Intentional invisibility also gives you perspective. When you temporarily step away from situations, you can see them more clearly. You identify toxic patterns, people who only come to you when they need something, dynamics that no longer serve you. Anonymity and freedom go together. When you're not always in the spotlight, when you're not always being watched and judged, you have room to be authentic, to experiment, to make mistakes, to grow without the pressure of constant performance. Remember, intentional invisibility is not about hiding from life. It's about consciously choosing when to participate in it. It's about understanding that your presence is a gift, not an obligation. And gifts given too often lose their value. 4. Social scarcity. Social scarcity is the most powerful economic principle applied to human relationships. The rarer you become, the more valuable you become. The less available, the more desired. It's pure emotional math, and whoever understands that controls the game. Have you ever noticed how people who are always available are also the least valued? How does that friend who cancels everything to find you end up being treated as a second option? How is it that those who respond on time are less respected than those who take time to respond? This is not cruelty, it is human nature. The human brain is programmed to value what is difficult to achieve. That's why you want more of what you can't have. That's why the person who ignores you sometimes attracts you more than the one who persecutes you. Scarcity activates the brain's reward system in a way that abundance never can. Social scarcity is not about being fake or manipulative. It's about understanding your own worth and not wasting it on those who don't deserve it. It's about being selective with your time, your energy, your presence. It's about stopping offering yourself to those who don't value you. When you practice social scarcity, you stop being the easy option. Stop being that person that everyone knows will be there, regardless of how they treat you. You become someone who needs to be earned, not someone who is always available. Rare presence has power that constant presence will never have. When you show up sporadically, when your appearances are special events, people pay attention. They value the time they have with you because they know it's limited. But be careful not to confuse social scarcity with emotional play. It's not about making charm or playing hard for ego. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are finite and precious resources. And precious resources are not distributed for free. Social scarcity also protects you from unbalanced relationships. When you're always available, you attract people who want to use your availability. When you're scarce, you attract people who truly value your company, not just your convenience. Digital minimalism is a form of social scarcity. When you're not on every social network, when you don't respond to every message right away, when you're not always online, you create artificial scarcity that increases your perceived value. Social scarcity forces people to go out of their way to gain access to you, and that effort creates emotional investment. The more someone tries to win her attention, the more she values that attention when she finally gets it. Have you ever noticed how the most popular restaurants are the hardest to get a table for? How are limited edition products most desired? How are people who are more socially selective more respected? Scarcity creates perception of value, and perception of value creates respect. Social scarcity also protects you from emotional burnout. When you're not always giving, always available, always solving other people's problems, you preserve energy for yourself. You avoid the burnout that comes from being everyone's emotional support. There's more. Social scarcity filters out low-quality people. Those who don't have the patience to wait for your answer, those who can't deal with your occasional unavailability, those who interpret your selectivity as arrogance, probably don't have the maturity to be in your life. The absence strategy is powerful because it forces people to miss you. When you disappear temporarily, when you are not always around, people begin to realize the value you add to their lives. They feel the emptiness that their absence creates. Remember, social scarcity is not about being antisocial or arrogant. It's about recognizing your own worth and acting accordingly. It's about understanding that you don't have to be available to everyone all the time. It's about consciously choosing where to invest your presence and energy. 5. Narrative control. Whoever controls the narrative controls reality. Not objective reality, but perceived reality, which is the only one that matters in human relationships. And the most effective way to control your narrative isn't by talking more about yourself, it's by talking less and letting others fill in the gaps. Have you ever noticed how people who talk too much about themselves end up being defined by their own words? How do they get stuck in their own explanations and justifications? How do they lose control over how they are perceived? This happens because they have handed over narrative control to the outside world. Narrative control begins with the control of information. Every detail you reveal about your life, every explanation you give, every justification you offer, is a piece of the puzzle that other people will use to form an image of who you are. And this image will not always be favorable. Digital reputation is built through digital traces that you leave everywhere. Every post, every comment, every photo, every online interaction contributes to a narrative about who you are. The problem is that you don't control how that information is interpreted or used against you. When you practice narrative control, you become an interesting mystery instead of an open book. People are curious about you because they can't decipher you completely. They create their own theories about who you are, and those theories are often more favorable than reality. Intentional opacity is a powerful tool for narrative control. When you don't reveal everything about yourself, when you keep certain parts of your life private, you force people to respect your boundaries. You teach that access to you is a privilege, not a right. Narrative control also means not defending oneself from every accusation, not explaining oneself to every criticism, not justifying oneself for every invasive question. When you explain yourself too much, you give ammunition to those who want to attack you. When you remain silent, you force others to deal with their own projections. The algorithmic manipulation of social networks tries to take narrative control out of your hands. Algorithms decide which aspects of your personality will be amplified, which posts will have reach, how you will be categorized and presented to other people. Resisting this is an act of personal sovereignty. Have you ever noticed how public people who talk too much end up being cancelled for their own words? How does each statement become ammunition for critics? How do they lose control over their own image? This is loss of narrative control on an industrial scale. Narrative control isn't about lying or creating a fake persona. It's about being strategic with the truth. It's about consciously choosing which aspects of yourself you're going to reveal, to whom and when. It's about understanding that not every truth needs to be shared. The informational vulnerability is real. Every piece of personal information you share can be used to manipulate you, blackmail you, or simply judge you. Narrative control is a form of protection against this vulnerability. When you control your narrative, you also control the expectations that people have of you. You don't get stuck in roles you didn't choose, in images that don't represent who you really are, in expectations you can't fulfill. Symbolic power comes from narrative control. When you can influence how people perceive you, you can influence how they behave towards you. You become someone who inspires respect, curiosity, admiration, rather than someone who is easily categorized and dismissed. Conscious self-censorship is a tool of narrative control. It's not about repressing yourself. It's about being strategic. It's about understanding that not every thought needs to become a word, not every word needs to become an action, not every action needs to become public content. Remember, your narrative is your most valuable property. It's how the world sees you, how you're remembered, how you're treated. When you hand over control of that narrative to other people, you hand over your power together. Stay in control. Be selective. Be strategic. 6. Selective presence. Selective presence is the art of being where you add value and absent where you don't. It's about quality versus quantity in all of your social interactions. It's about understanding that your presence is a limited and valuable resource, not something that should be distributed indiscriminately. Have you ever noticed how some people can make more of an impact by appearing sporadically than others who are always present? How do they become the center of attention when they decide to show up? This is not natural charisma. It is selective presence applied intelligently. Selective presence begins with understanding that not every event deserves your presence. Not every conversation deserves your participation. Not every situation deserves your energy. You are not obligated to be everywhere all the time for all people. When you practice selective presence, you stop being that person who shows up in everything but doesn't show up for anything. You become someone whose presence is noticed, remembered, valued, because people know that when you choose to be there, it's because it's really worth it. The attention economy has turned presence into a cheap commodity. Everyone wants your attention, your time, your energy. Social networks, events, people, work, family, all competing for the same scarce resource. You. Selective presence is a way of resisting this exploitation. Selective presence also protects you from parasitic relationships. You know those people who only come to you when they need something, that they only invite you when they have no better option, that they only value their presence when it is convenient for them? Selective presence filters these people automatically. When you're selective with your presence, you force people to cherish the moments they have with you. You create more intense memories because your attention is fully present when you choose to be there. You're not half present, dividing attention with 1,000 other things. Selective presence is not about being antisocial or arrogant. It's about being intentional. It's about consciously choosing where to invest your social energy. It's about understanding that you can't be everywhere at once and still maintain the quality of your presence. FOMO, fear of missing out, is the enemy of selective presence. It convinces you that you need to be in everything, see everything, participate in everything, otherwise you're missing out on something important. Lie. Most of the time, you're wasting time and energy on things that don't add value to your life. Selective presence also means knowing when to leave. Not to stay until the end of every party, not to participate in every discussion to the end, not to get involved in every drama to the conclusion. Know when your presence has stopped adding value and retreat elegantly. Have you ever noticed how people who are always available end up being less respected? How does that colleague who accepts every invitation end up being treated as a second option? How does those who are always present end up becoming invisible? The constant presence dilutes the impact. Selective presence creates anticipation. When people know that you're selective about where you show up, they're more eager to have your presence. They try harder to convince you to participate. They value it more when you accept to be there. There's more. Selective presence gives you negotiating power. When your presence is scarce and valued, you can set conditions. You can choose not only where to be, but how to be. You can set the terms of your participation. Selective presence also preserves its authenticity. When you're only present in situations that really make sense to you, you don't have to feign interest, enthusiasm, or connection. You can be genuinely present because you chose to be there. Social burnout is real. Being always present, always available, always socially connected is exhausting. Selective presence is a form of self-care. It's about preserving energy for the moments and people that really matter. Remember, your presence is a gift, and present data indiscriminately lose its value. Be selective, be strategic. Be present when you choose to be present, and absent when it best serves your interests and well-being. 7. Advantageous privacy. Privacy in the 21st century is not paranoia, it is competitive advantage. While everyone voluntarily exposes themselves, handing over personal data, habits, preferences, and vulnerabilities for free, those who protect their privacy retain negotiating power and control over their own lives. Have you ever stopped to think about how much of your information is scattered on the internet? How many companies know their consumption habits, their political preferences, their fears, their desires? How many people have access to intimate details of your life through your social networks? This exposure is not innocent, it is strategic, and not in his favor. Advantageous privacy starts with understanding that information is power. And when you hand over your information for free, you're handing over power over you to other people. Power to influence you, manipulate you, control you, exploit you. Data capitalism has turned your private life into a product. Every click, every search, every like, every comment is collected, analyzed, and sold. You are not the customer of social networks. You are the product. And products have no privacy. They have forced transparency to facilitate exploitation. When you protect your privacy, you break that cycle of exploitation. You stop feeding the system with free information about yourself. You regain control over your data, your habits, your life. You stop being a product and go back to being a person. Advantageous privacy is not about having something to hide. It's about having something to protect. your autonomy, your freedom, your ability to make decisions without outside influence, your ability to change and grow without being judged for what you've been in the past. Have you ever noticed how people who maintain private lives are more respected? How do they generate more curiosity and interest? How can they reinvent themselves more easily because they are not tied to a crystallized public image? Privacy gives flexibility that exposure takes away. Social surveillance is real, not only from governments or corporations, but from the people around them. Everyone became an amateur detective, investigating profiles, analyzing posts, drawing conclusions about other people's lives. Privacy protects you from this constant and invasive surveillance. Advantageous privacy also protects your relationships. When you don't expose every detail of your love, family, or social life, you avoid external judgments, unsolicited advice, unnecessary interference. You keep your relationships safe from outside influences. Anonymity and freedom go together. When you're not always being watched and judged, you have room to experiment, to make mistakes, to grow. You can be authentic without fear of cancellation, judgment, or exploitation of your vulnerability. Advantageous privacy means controlling the flow of information about you, consciously deciding what to reveal, to whom, when, and why. It's not about lying or cheating. It's about being strategic with the truth. Have you ever noticed how people who share everything end up being less interesting? How do they lose their mystery, their depth, their ability to surprise? Privacy keeps you interesting because it keeps you unpredictable. Advantageous privacy also protects you from emotional manipulation. When people don't know your vulnerabilities, your fears, your insecurities, they can't use that information against you. You keep your cards close to your chest. Digital reputation is permanent. Everything you post, comment on, or share can be used against you in the future. Advantageous privacy is a way to protect your future from your present. Is to prevent today's impulsive decisions from becoming tomorrow's permanent problems. Emotional independence comes in part from privacy. When you don't rely on constant external validation, when you don't need social media approval to feel good about yourself, you develop a healthier relationship with your own identity. Remember, privacy is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It's not paranoia, it's protection. It's not antisociality, it's strategy. In a world that profits from your exposure, protecting your privacy is an act of resistance and self-preservation. 8. Powerful absence. Powerful absence is not abandonment, it is strategy. It is the art of using your absence as a tool for communication, influence, and control. It is to understand that sometimes you communicate more by not being present than by being. It is discovering that your absence can be more impactful than your presence. Have you ever noticed how some people can influence situations even when they are not present? How are they remembered, mentioned, felt even in their absence? How does your lack create a void that other people feel the need to fill? This is powerful absence in action. Powerful absence works because it forces people to deal with reality without you. When you always solve other people's problems, when you are always available to help, when you always show up to save the day, you prevent people from developing autonomy and responsibility. When you are absent strategically, you force people to value your presence. They begin to realize what you add to their lives, how much they depend on you, the emptiness that your absence creates. And this perception generates respect and appreciation. Powerful absence is not about punishing or manipulating. It's about teaching through experience. It is to show your value through your lack. It's allowing people to feel the difference you make when you choose to be present. Have you ever noticed how people who are always available end up being less valued? How does that friend who always cancels his plans to help others end up being treated as a second option? The powerful absence breaks this pattern of devaluation. Powerful absence also protects you from parasitic relationships. When you are absent, you quickly identify who really cares about you versus who only comes to you when you need something. The absence filters out low-quality people automatically. Disappearing with elegance is an art. It's not ghosting, it's not disappearance without explanation. It is to consciously withdraw when your presence is not being valued, when you are giving more than you receive, when the environment is no longer serving you. Powerful absence creates anticipation. When people know you can be away at any time, they try harder to keep you around. They treat you better because they know you're not guaranteed in their life. Have you ever noticed how people who threaten to leave but never go lose credibility? How do they become predictable and easily manipulated? Powerful absence is about following through. It's about actually being absent when necessary, not just threatening. Powerful absence also gives you perspective. When you temporarily step away from situations, relationships, or environments, you can see them more clearly. You identify toxic patterns, harmful dynamics, people who don't add value to your life. The absence strategy is especially powerful in unbalanced relationships. When you always give more than you receive, when you are always available but the other person is not, when you always make the effort but it is not reciprocated, absence rebalances the dynamic. Powerful absence teaches limits. When you are absent from situations where your boundaries are not respected, you clearly communicate that certain things are not acceptable. You teach how you want to be treated through your actions, not your words. There's more. Powerful absence preserves your energy. When you absent yourself from situations that drain your energy without giving anything in return, you preserve resources to invest where it's really worthwhile. You stop wasting yourself on relationships and unproductive situations. The powerful absence also creates mystery. When you're not always present, always available, always predictable, you become more interesting. People are curious about where you are, what you're doing, why you've chosen to be away. Remember, your presence is valuable, but your absence can be even more powerful. Use it strategically. He is absent when he is not being valued. Withdraw when the environment doesn't suit you. Disappear when your presence is being explored. Your absence can teach you more respect than your constant presence ever can. 9. Digital resistance. Digital resistance is the conscious refusal to participate in the technological exploitation of your attention, data, and private life. It is to understand that digital platforms are not neutral. They are systems designed to addict you, exploit you, and control you. And resisting this is an act of personal sovereignty. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to put down your cell phone? How do you feel an almost physical compulsion to check notifications, scroll feeds, reply to messages? This is not your weakness. It's intentional design. Digital platforms have been designed by neuroscience experts to create dependency. Digital resistance starts with recognizing that you're being manipulated. Every notification, every like, every comment is calculated to release dopamine in your brain and keep you hooked. You're not using social media. They're using you. The attention economy has turned your ability to concentrate into a product. Tech companies profit by keeping you distracted, anxious, always looking for the next dose of digital validation. Your attention is literally sold to advertisers. To resist is to regain your ability to focus. Digital resistance is not about rejecting all technology. It's about using technology consciously, intentionally, strategically. It's about controlling when and how you connect, rather than being controlled by the compulsion to always be online. Social media detox is a powerful form of digital resistance. When you temporarily disconnect, you break the cycle of dependency. You regain the ability to be present in the real world, to have thoughts of your own, to feel good about yourself without external validation. Have you ever noticed how your ability to concentrate has decreased since you started using social networks intensively? How do you have trouble reading a book, watching a movie, or having a conversation without checking your phone? Digital resistance is to regain your capacity for deep attention. Digital resistance also protects your mental health. The constant comparison with edited and filtered lives of others generates anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. Constant exposure to negative news generates chronic stress. The search for external validation generates emotional dependence. Algorithmic manipulation is real and sophisticated. Algorithms know exactly what kind of content keeps you engaged, what kind of emotion makes you click, what kind of teasing makes you comment. They use this knowledge to keep you hooked on the platform for as long as possible. Digital resistance means setting clear boundaries with technology. Specific times to check messages, periods of the day without a cell phone, apps blocked during certain hours. It is treating technology as a tool, not as an extension of your body. Have you ever noticed how people who use less social media seem calmer, more present, more satisfied with their lives? How do they have deeper conversations, more authentic relationships, more developed hobbies? Digital resistance preserves its humanity. Digital resistance also protects your privacy. Every click, every search, every interaction is collected and analyzed. Your psychological profile is built and sold. Their vulnerabilities are identified and exploited. To resist is to protect your mental autonomy. Performative authenticity is one of the greatest dangers of social networks. You get to live for the content, to turn genuine experiences into posts, to filter your life through the lens of online approval. Digital resistance preserves its real authenticity. Digital resistance creates mental space. When you are not constantly bombarded by information, opinions, images, and digital stimuli, you have space to think, to feel, to process, to create. You regain your inner life. The digital panopticon is a reality. You are being monitored constantly across your devices. Their location, their habits, their preferences, their vulnerabilities are known and exploited. Digital resistance is a way to escape this surveillance. Remember, digital resistance is not about going back to the Stone Age. It's about using technology consciously, not being used by it. It's about maintaining your humanity in an increasingly digitized world. It's about preserving your ability to think, feel, and exist independently of digital validation. Descartes' personal sovereignty. Personal sovereignty is the final state of those who have mastered the art of silence, invisibility, and control over their own life. It's when you no longer need external approval to exist. You don't depend on the validation of others to feel valuable. You don't submit to social expectations that don't make sense to you. You got here because you understood that the game has changed. That constant exposure doesn't make you more important, it makes you more vulnerable. That forced transparency doesn't make you more authentic, it makes you more controllable. That total availability doesn't make you more loved, it makes you more exploited. Personal sovereignty is the synthesis of everything we have discussed. Using silence strategically, practicing intentional invisibility, creating social scarcity, controlling your narrative, being selective with your presence, protecting your privacy, using absence as power, resisting digital manipulation. When you achieve personal sovereignty, you stop reacting and start acting. He stops being moved by circumstances and starts creating his own circumstances. He stops being a product of other people's expectations and becomes the author of his own story. Personal sovereignty is not about isolation or arrogance. It's about emotional independence. It's about having a solid foundation within yourself that can't be shaken by criticism, rejection, abandonment, or external manipulation. It's about being complete on your own. Have you ever noticed how sovereign people have a different presence? How do they radiate calm, confidence, self-control? How do they not get carried away by dramas? Do not get involved in unnecessary discussions? Do not explain themselves to anyone. This is the energy of personal sovereignty. Personal sovereignty means that you no longer have to prove anything to anyone. He does not need to justify his choices, explain his decisions, defend his positions. You act according to your values and principles, regardless of the opinion of others. Emotional independence is the heart of personal sovereignty. That's when you don't need other people to make you feel good about yourself. This is when your self-esteem does not depend on likes, comments, compliments, or external validation. That's when you're your own source of value. Personal sovereignty also means complete control over your time, energy, and attention. You consciously decide where to invest these resources. You don't waste energy on people who don't value you, situations that don't serve you, activities that don't develop you. When you have personal sovereignty, you attract high-quality people, people who respect their limits, value their presence, admire their inner strength. You stop attracting needy, manipulative, parasitic people because your energy no longer resonates with that kind of dynamic. Personal sovereignty gives you real power of choice. You can choose to be in relationships because you want to, not because you have to. You can choose jobs that make sense to you, not just the ones that pay the bills. You can choose how to live your life based on your values, not social expectations. Have you noticed how sovereign people are less affected by crises, changes, instabilities? How do they adapt more easily, recover faster, stay centered even in chaotic situations? Personal sovereignty is a form of emotional anti-fragility. Personal sovereignty is not a destiny, it is a process. It is a daily practice of consciously choosing how to react, how to behave, how to invest your energy. It is an ongoing commitment to your own freedom and autonomy. Personal sovereignty protects you from the tyranny of other people's opinions. You stop living to please others. You stop modifying your behavior to fit in. You stop repressing your authenticity to be accepted. You live up to your own standards. When you have personal sovereignty, you become an example to others, not through preaching or counseling, but through his way of being. You inspire others to seek their own freedom, their own strength, their own sovereignty. Personal sovereignty is the antidote to the society of transparency. It is the refusal to be a product, a commodity, entertainment for others. It is the affirmation of his complete, complex, private humanity. It is the right to exist on its own terms. Remember, personal sovereignty is not something you earn once and keep forever. It's something you practice every day, in every choice, in every interaction, in every decision. It is the daily commitment to be free, autonomous, and true to oneself, regardless of external pressures.